Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 3, Episode 16. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
All right, well, let's talk about earnings. Lots of different earnings coming out over the past week. We could spend a whole episode on just talking about earnings, but sum it all up for us, because how do we kind of frame this in a couple of three things that you've observed from this earnings cycle?
Yeah, I was making note as we do during the week as the stories we want to talk about, and I ended up with like 15 companies that had earnings reports. And I thought, well, we're not going to go through all this. This isn't CNBC, and there's other reasons not to do it. But when I was thinking about it, I thought, well, there's a little bit of the kind of the stores strike back, dead cat bounce sort of narrative, and perhaps epitomized by some of the more traditional apparel companies like a Ralph Lauren, or just this morning, again, you mentioned we were recording this on Thursday, Dillard's, big regional department store, posting really great sales increases and pretty solid profitability. And I think, as you try to dissect the numbers, is this suggests that these mature brands are somehow having this big renaissance and are really going to be remarkable going forward? I'd say no. This doesn't speak to that. What it speaks to is they're comparing against a period where stores were closed, where people were not spending nearly what they would normally spend on apparel and accessories. And we're also in a moment where, because of shortness of supply, we haven't seen as many promotions. And so the gross margins are very good. So I think we're in a moment in time for maybe another quarter or two with some of these brands. The other kind of characteristic, I think, and we touched on this last week with Wayfair's earnings, but Peloton reported this past week, and they've seen the boom that was caused by COVID really slow down a lot, and therefore their profitability got hit. So I think there's this bounce back kind of phenomenon from brands that were hit very hard. There's some brands that certainly got a real unusual push because they were in the home or home fitness or work from home kind of space. And that's being tempered. The other thing I think, just to keep taking a look at, and I know we did get into this a lot with Wayfair last week, is some businesses like DoorDash, which reported huge sales increases, but worsening profits. Some of the resale companies and these disruptive brands, again, where they got this big boost because of this huge shift to e-commerce that's now moderating a bit, still can't seem to make money in what would seem to be kind of a perfect storm. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack in, going through this sort of noisy period where we kind of rebalance a bit to closer to normal, regression to the mean, whatever you want to call it. But, when you go to the underlying economics, why is it that DoorDash still loses so much money? Like, where is the pricing, the cost piece? Because presumably they're past the peak of spending on creating awareness, or past the peak on building out their technology, right? Like, at this point, it's kind of cost of goods sold, which is really delivery drivers against the price, against the cut that the restaurant companies get. So I think really starting to pay attention to those go forward margins is going to be interesting as we hopefully get to a period that's a little bit more stable than we've seen.
I'd love to do an episode in season 4. By the way, we should tell the people that we are going to wrap our season 3 in December. I think it's our last episode of season 3, and we've been renewed for season 4. So we'll
folks at the network said yes.
Yeah, it was, as we said last time, it was touch and go. But we are going to do season 4. We'll pick it up again, actually around NRF in January, I think, is when we'll launch our season 4. We have lots of stuff to continue to talk about, so stay tuned for that. But I'd love in season 4 in 2022 to talk about this intersection between, how do these folks make money? We're not really a restaurant food service podcast, but there is an integration between grocery, right? This grocer rant. A lot of the grocers have upped their game, particularly now, right? They've had a lot of people, they've been the beneficiary of a lot of transference of volume from the food service perspective. So they're taking a good hard look at how do we not just make, plates of roasted chicken on a Wednesday night special, but how do we actually make, and then how do we make good restaurant quality food? And then therefore, how do we integrate into these delivery services? Because they need to play in that in some way, shape, or form. So I think there's lots of lots of food for thought, if I can make that
Well,
obvious. If I can.
unfortunately, I don't have a good pun. Not that that was a particularly good pun, but I do think, we talk a lot about the blurring of the lines between digital and physical, and we've gone into the kind of hybridization of retail. And I think the food industry is an interesting one, right? Because it used to be much more, well, here are groceries, and you go there and you take stuff home. Here are restaurants. But
never the
and
two
not
shall
that
meet.
Prepared foods, and not that there haven't been prepared foods or takeout sushi or whatever, but it was still, there was kind of a standard playbook. Didn't evolve very much, but with restaurant, with more delivery, with more pickup, with a number of grocers elevating their offering, it is kind of a new world, and that's worth digging into, I think, in the future.
Well, it does give me the opportunity to say the word grocerant, which is one of my favorite words. So we don't need to.
It's not as good as bifurcation,
anyway.
but
no,
it's all right.
No,
yeah.
I don't think an angel will get its wings when I say grocerant, but nor is it as offensive as what is they called? Phygical. So let's get phygical out of the way.
Phygital, yes.
Phygital. Yeah.
Yes.
Smash that subscription button so you don't miss a single episode or a single moment of the thought leadership that's coming out from us here. Anyway, well, listen, without further ado, and there's been much ado, without further ado, let's get to our episode talking about private label, because it's a fascinating discussion. So let's kick that off too.